Good evening, Whaalawhalahiatu, and welcome to tonight's bulletin of BCN News. Leading the news tonight, the government is going to reduce the number of days passengers are required to spend in quarantine from 14 days to 10 days as part of what is called significant changes to Niue's COVID-19 response plan. We spoke to Premier Honourable Dalton Tangilanghi about these new changes today. Premier Honourable Dalton Tangilanghi this afternoon said that these changes will likely come into effect in December. The changes will see the number of days in MIQ drop from 13 currently to 10. The decision was made based on risk assessment information about the Delta variant, which apparently has a shorter incubation period.
Not so much following New Zealand, but the advice that we had been receiving it previously before New Zealand made that decision for the cut it down from 14 to 7 days and 3 days at home. We already been looking at your own of 10 days in managed isolation, because you say you take your test on day 3 and then on arrival, day 3 and day 6. The 4 days, they're all negative. I don't see the point. And plus also when it makes the decision is so that they have said the incubation period, it's a short term in the first 3 days or 4 days. And I think now they'll realise that, and that's why New Zealand have come down. But it does match up with our one. Ours are different. 10 days in managed isolation before. We'll cut it up by 4 days.
Meanwhile, locals are still quite concerned at some of the COVID protocols, such as relocating MIQ patients needing hospital care to the aged care unit at the Niuefo Hospital. Currently, there is one MIQ patient at the aged care facility since last week because of underlying health conditions. Director General of Health and Social Services, Galen Tasmania, told BCN News that the patient had returned negative COVID tests and is not deemed a risk to the elderly folks living at the same facility. The 35 passengers who arrived on Monday, the 1st of November, will be released on Sunday, the 14th of November, if their day 12 tests return negative. And Premier Tangilanghi is also very pleased with the speech delivered at COP26 in Glasgow by Niue's Special Envoy to the Climate Change Conference, Dr. Dean Rex. Here's more on that story. Dr. Dean Rex delivered the 6 minutes speech at 2 a.m. local time yesterday morning.
On behalf of my Premier, the Honourable Dalton Tangilanghi, and the people of Niue, Niue extends its gratitude to the United Kingdom, to the City of Glasgow and its welcoming people, to the Right Honourable Alok Sharma, COP26 President. We commend you and your team on the enormous effort in hosting this conference, and we commit our full support for a successful outcome. Mr. President, 19 years ago, Niue's Premier addressed the World Summit on Sustainable Development. He said, "History and our children would judge us." And at COP26, my friends, the message is the same. History and our children will judge us that we are failing. As a global family, we should have made much more progress by now, so that no country should have to come to another COP and say that line again. For decades, we have heard promises of ambition, and yet, time after time, there is no action, only targets and failed promises. We must achieve success here, not just for us, but for our children and their children. Mr. President, this COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent economic crisis has seen the world take bold and decisive action. Central banks mobilized trillions to combat the crisis. COVID-19 vaccines were produced in record time. Let us now apply that bold, decisive action to fighting climate change. In Paris in 2015, we all agreed to pursue efforts to limit global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, the recent IPCC report shows that we are failing. We are heading for 2.7 degrees.
Premier Tangilangi said he did not watch the speech live but saw a recording of it a few hours later.
I'm thankful that we have some people, and especially in this caliber, that can help us there in London. And that's important, meaning that we were there in person. I think that's the key objective of why we wanted someone on the ground representing us. And this is the way forward for us, and this is what the government is looking at. Utilizing some of our other ONIWAMs that are living abroad. We're all aware of Shanghai and Japan and all these, and these guys can do the same thing, what Dr. Rex has done for us. So the best thing that we have delivered for the world to know how we feel and what are our views regarding it. So I think the region, if anything, not tired in a way of fighting, but tired in a way of traveling to all these around the globe just to take our voice, and yet how many years or how many COP now that nothing has done.
Mr. President, COP26 cannot be remembered as just another COP. It must be remembered as the COP that put humanity back on track towards keeping the 1.5-degree target alive. In the end, you are free to choose, but we all are not free from the consequences of your choices. Thank you for listening, Kim Winwina.
A great speech there and very poignant message at COP26. In other news, the government will be holding a multi-agency meeting and debrief after the fire incident at the village of Makifu 2 weeks ago, which left 2 families homeless. Also on the agenda will be discussions about smoke detectors and fire alarms, as well as the requirements of the updated National Building Code. The departments involved include the National Disaster Management Office, the Police Department, Departments of Transport and Utilities, Environment Department, Department of Health, and Community Affairs. According to government sources, the updated building code does make specific mention of smoke alarms and fire extinguishers. However, while the code sets the requirements, normally the responsibility for fire protection appliances like smoke detectors and fire extinguishers is the responsibility of the homeowner. The Fire Rescue Services a few years ago brought in fire extinguishers for local businesses in a Chamber of Commerce subsidized scheme. The children aged 12 to 15-year-olds will be receiving their second dose of the Pfizer vaccine on Friday next week, the 19th of November. 98% of the eligible children took their first dose 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, 138 children took their first dose out of a total of 141 eligible to take the vaccine. The Health Department are expecting the 138 children to complete their vaccination with the second dose next Friday. The Pfizer vaccines for the children were donated by the New Zealand government as part of their Pacific-wide COVID response package. The Chief of Police, Timothy Wilson, has confirmed that if there is a threat of a cyclone over the next 2.5 months, the government's preferred MIQ facility at Homofisi will be evacuated to the Lealangi facility at Lakapa. There are, though, questions as to why not relocate the MIQ to Lealangi now to avoid any unnecessary risk, instead of waiting until there is a cyclone alert to evacuate people from MIQ. Chief of Police Tim Wilson was on News of the Week radio program on Friday last week when this question was posed to him as to why not relocate MIQ to Lealangi during the cyclone season.
The big issue is Lealangi is not set up for the number of people we have for long term. So Lealangi has a couple of rooms, but then it has the big halls. Right, so in order to take people and have them stay there for 2 weeks, there'd be no privacy. There'd be issues with not having their own personal space, which leads to mental health difficulties and all that kind of and stuff for people. So the reason why we use Lealangi is because if we go into, and this has been the evacuation center since the beginning of COVID, we had an evacuation plan in place because we can go put somebody up there or a group of people up there for a couple of days, a day or two, while the cyclone passes, and if it's safe, we can move them back to home office if we need to for the longer term stay. So, we look at cyclones. Lakapa, Leolangi is safe because it's one of the safer places because it's high. It's on the top shelf, and it's also far away from the sea. Where home office is, it's actually pretty protected. Rarely do we have massive cyclone damage there. But so if we get to that point, we can move somebody, we can go back and assess the safety of home office and then move them back. But it's mainly a facility that's set up for privacy and everything.
There are, though, concerns about whether the added responsibilities of relocating MIQ or evacuating MIQ passengers during a cyclone alert is placing additional stress on the small police force, who are also the leading agency as first responders during a cyclone. However, the chief is confident that his team are well prepared as they have had practice during the last cyclone season when MIQ was still at home office. Sentiments supported also by Premier Honourable Dalton Tagelangi.
Well, I'm hoping that there's no cyclone. Follow from last year. Yes, be alright. Should we? And then again, what happened if there's no cyclone? And it's going to be also a logistics nightmare. But be prepared. But we are hoping for the best, that nothing, no bad weather. That means that we can continue with home office at the moment. But that's what we're hoping for.
The police and the Disaster Management Office are expecting additional staff support from their counterparts in New Zealand to help the Disaster Management Office during the cyclone season. According to the Niue Met Office, the predictions are that Niue should expect either 1 or 2 cyclones from now until the end of April next year. The first woman to hold the post of Governor-General of New Zealand and Niue, Dame Catherine Tizard, passed away on Sunday, the 31st of October. She was 90 years old. Premier Dalton Tagelangi yesterday in a press release conveyed the government and the people of Niue's condolences to her family. Dame Catherine Tizard was Governor-General from 1990 to 1996, following a distinguished career in local government and working for community organisations. Records obtained from the archives of the Taonga Niue Department showed that Dame Catherine visited Niue in October 1992 during the 18th anniversary of self-government and free association with New Zealand. In her delegation was the then Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand, Sir Don McKinnon. Yesterday, Honourable Premier Dalton Tagelangi, in a press release, sent his sincere condolences to the family of the late Dame Catherine Tizard. And to end the news, the largest women's organisation on the island is the FCW, or the Fellowship of Christian Women. On Saturday last week, they celebrated 75 years as an organisation. Footage used in this story is from Rocksteady Productions. Thank you to Glenn Jackson and his team. The organisation was originally called Lipi Nesea until 1946, when they changed to Fellowship of Christian Women, Whakapotpotoanga he o Whiwhine Keresiano Niue FCW. To mark the occasion of 75 years, the FCW provided gifts to their longest-serving members, those over 80 years old. There were 26 of them altogether, 6 of whom are currently overseas. The national gathering at the Millennium Hall started with a church service attended by Premier Dalton Tagelangi, Minister Honourable Esa Monainu and Lady Fifita Talangi. The service was led by FCW President Reverend Mautawhinga Diamond Tauevihi. After the service, the ladies celebrated together with lunch and performances from each of the village FCW groups. And that's our bulletin of BCN News for tonight. Do join us again on Tuesday next week for our bulletin in Wangahau Niue. But please do go up to the village of Toi on Saturday and support them at their annual village show day. But from us here at BCN News, you have a lovely evening. Good night. Nono fua.